All right. Hello, everyone. This is the seventh edition of What's Up in Global Law, sponsored by the Global Chamber. It's called a Globinar, and I'm honored and privileged to have two very esteemed subject matter specialists with us today. S. Lovey Parker, the founder of Black Hoteliers and Investors Association, and Jomi Metipara, a partner with Dickinson Wright, the law firm. And Jomi has a specialty in intellectual property, but I would not constrain it to that. I would simply say he's a subject matter specialist. And we're honored to have our co-host and co-producer, Jemima Escalatura, working with us today to keep us on schedule. So with that lead in, let's cover some guidelines. And I'm going to actually ask of you as the audience to help us do two things. Number one, make sure that you get from the event what it is going to be valuable for you. So please put your questions and comments in the chat because there's a specific time in which we're going to look at them and try to respond. But number two, we'll also communicate to you that we're not going to be giving legal advice today. Instead, we're going to be listening and interacting with our subject matter specialists like S. Lovey Parker, who is a transformative leader in hospitality and is pioneering efforts to increase Black ownership of independent and boutique hotels through her Black Hoteliers and Investors Association. S. Lovey's career is unique and has a blend of market and cultural intelligence with an influence from boardrooms beyond. One notable goal is she set for BHNIA a mission of creating $8 billion ecosystem value for Black-owned hospitality assets by 2060. And that is no mean feat. And we also get the privilege of listening to Jomi Metipara, a partner with Dickinson Wright. He's a business attorney. He advises entrepreneurs, business executives, and general counsel. In fact, Jomi was gracious enough to spend some time with me at a DC place talking about my legal tech startup. He's experienced in intellectual property law matters. He advises clients related from Fortune 500 onto startups and tech companies. And his experience and his generosity expand beyond that. And of course, we have our ever-present co-producer, Jemima Escalatura. So while we're not going to give you legal advice, we will want you to leave with a sense that you have a community of people who are interested in your success. And we want to share with you now some information about how things that are happening in the world today relate to global law, international trade, and opportunities. So we encourage you to reach out to our subject matter specialist or to the Global Chamber if you want to know more beyond this presentation. With that said, we're going to start with what's hot. And that's kind of one of our two icebreakers to get everyone in the mood for talking about law, trade, and related matters. There's been a number of discussions about that, but what breaks through is the humanity of the challenge of the situation in Gaza and kids and families and people starving to death. I want to ask our subject matter specialist, do you agree with that as being the hottest topic today? And if so, what implications does it have for law and global trade? Does anyone want to volunteer to start, or should I ask a volunteer?
I can. So your question is regarding world hunger, you said,
Yes, and the
and how it
situation
affects
in
global
Gaza.
trade. Yeah, I
Yes.
mean, I think the way hunger is a humanitarian issue, and it's an unfortunate issue, and sadly, it really uh, shouldn't be so prevalent in in the 21st century. But yeah, it's still there, right? And I think the way it affects, global trade and economic development is oftentimes hunger is caused by war. It's caused by greed. It's caused by unjust leadership, and that often leads to conflict. And when we talk about uh, global trade, um, there is a rise in defense work. The European, NATO just a lot of the member countries with NATO recently signed on to increase their defense spending. Um, and that actually is going to spur on some economic development. Maybe not in the ways that we all hope and wish for, um, but yeah, it'll certainly have an effect.
And thank you for that, Jomi. Eslavi, anything that you would like to air or add at this time?
Yeah, I'm happy to share. Thank you so much for those insights, Jomi. I am along the same lines of you as, when we think about hunger, it's definitely a humanitarian issue. And anytime we have anything that is threatening humanitarian issues, especially something as basic as hunger, it doesn't allow us as a human race to be actualized, right? And so I think that impacts the greater ecosystem of what's possible economically, not just in that specific geographic area, but throughout the globe. So I definitely think that it's worthy of being a hot topic, and anything that we can do to spur innovation and or solutions, especially when it comes to basic human needs and rights, it definitely needs to be addressed so that we can all take part in this amazing experience that we call life.
Eslavi and Jomi, thank you so much for that. And I'd just like to add something from a slightly different perspective, but it's definitely relevant. Previously, our law practice had the honor of working with the United States Institute of Peace and being one of their ambassadors for an awards program. And one of the reasons we reached out to them was because we believe that economic opportunity is a diversion from violence. So, and to put it in direct terms, their paraphrase was, if someone has an opportunity to make their life better or to pursue a joyful life, they're less likely to want to engage in revolution and violence against other parties. So, policy-wise, this destabilizes the Middle East and also areas associated with it. As a practically human matter, there's innovation and there's opportunity for each life. It should be valued as priceless. And so the things that we can do as a global community to enhance that and to sustain life, I think we should be doing. And I think the U.S. Institute of Peace was emblematic of that. And I would hope and do my best to help energize folks to help to sustain and support the Palestinian community and people of good faith around the world. So with that said, let's move forward in our agenda and talk about the next area of interest to the community that's involved. And that's moving beyond what's the hottest topic today to kind of like the global top 10. And for those who don't know, we have this nerdy approach where we typically try to consult with a number of different large language models. And our concept is pretty direct. We want to see what the artificial intelligence says, because we believe that that's suboptimal. We believe the best combination is artificial intelligence for the things that it does well, in concert with authentic intelligence, like a Jomi Mithapara, like a S. Lovey, like a John Mungus, to validate and offer a human perspective to what's happening. And what that does is that reduces the risk of mistakes, which we know from the literature as well as from my experience happen with artificial intelligence. So we typically consult those models, and then we provide to our subject matter specialists, what do you think about their top 10? In this case, because I happen to be both recovering from the death of a family member and also recovering from COVID, I didn't get a chance to do my normal consultation with all four models. I got a chance to look at one. And it provided a number of different areas that it recommended as being the most important in the world today. But I can say from talking to our panelists, nothing compared to what's happening in Gaza. So what we just shared about our perspective on the Gaza starvation is paramount. And I don't think there's anything else that the other models could add at this time. But it does set the stage for the next step. I mentioned the knowledge of our subject matter specialist. I also mentioned S. Lovey. I want to introduce her to feature discussion about what she's doing with BHNIA because it is unique in its own right. My understanding is she's stimulating a community of underrepresented people who haven't really invested capital into hotels in general and luxury hotels in particular. And she's pursuing creating a lot of economic value for not just her stakeholders, but potentially for jobs and other developments for the world. The slide you see before you is an actual building, which I found to be phenomenal. It's a hotel in Singapore. It's real. And it is an example of a unique luxury hotel that is understood to be providing returns on investment for stakeholders and economic development for Singapore. With that possibility, that visual, we want to ask S. Lovey Parker to talk about her view of economic development in the context of BHNIA. So S. Lovey, if you would, please.
Yes, thank you, Chris. Again, it's such a pleasure and privilege to be here with you all today, and especially with the listeners and the viewers that you have on. So, Chris, I'm happy to share a little bit more. I'd love to make this a little bit more conversational, so you're more than welcome if you like to come back on, but I'll get us started and share a little bit about Black Hoteliers and Investors Association. So BHNIA, which is our acronym, we were born from a couple of different interesting spaces, but most predominantly at Georgetown University, where I was focused intently on my master's program. And my master's thesis was focused specifically at this nexus, at social impact, specifically boutique and independent hotels, and then also capital, private equity, venture capital, and the like. And so BHNIA was born out of that thesis, first of its kind scholarly research, because something just had to be done. It's interesting when you can uncover what a challenge is, but once you uncover that challenge, I think it's also your onus and your responsibility to do something about it. And BHNIA is that solution. So our mission and vision is data backed, and it is our intention to scale the majority Black owned, independent, and boutique hotels and accommodation space to 8 billion by 2060. And as Chris mentioned, that is not anything to scoff at. Thank you, Chris. We're really excited about the opportunity. There's a soft sense of urgency here, but at the same time, it's very clear to see the opportunity, especially when the boutique and independent sector typically outperform its flagged counterparts. And when I say flagged, think about your Hiltons, your Hyatts, your IHGs. But these independent accommodations typically are not backed by the larger engines. We see this in the startup space as well. You know, a lot of those organizations are independent. They're doing it on their own. And a lot of the hotel entrepreneurs or hoteliers, they're doing the same thing. It's just in a completely different segment that's typically have been untapped by venture capital and maybe even private equity in some instances, just because of how asset heavy or capital asset reliant it is. But BHNIA is here to kind of shift that lens and that opportunity, and we're really excited. I'm so glad Chris shared this photo because this is quite an asset here. And when I think about the opportunity to scale majority Black owned accommodations brands across the globe, this is definitely something to keep our eye on. So thanks for sharing this model from Singapore.
Well, thank you for that, Cher. And full disclosure, Our firm actually does some work with S. Levy's organization. And it's one of the reasons we identified what they're doing as being unique and worthy of sharing with this audience. Now I want to bridge, though, because the opening description of our topic is economic development and innovation and how that can be leveraged to create return on investment. Let's step forward a bit. So we've heard from S. Levy about economic development in the context of energizing segments to invest in hotels. And hotels have a local benefit as well as a potentially stakeholder benefit. But let's take an analytical look that bridges S. Levy's perspective on economic development with some of Jomi's expertise on innovation. The slide you see before you was provided by 3 different data sources at the bottom: World Intellectual Property Organization, International Monetary Fund, and the OECD. And the ask in using an artificial intelligence tool was, show us data that addresses the linkage between economic development, investment in innovation, and return on investment. What you have is the slide which shows from between roughly about 2015 through about 2025, there is a significant correlation between money put into economic development and innovation and return on investment. And this is an economic driving opportunity, not only for the funding sources, but for the stakeholders who are actually receiving returns. So let me ask our subject matter specialists, both Jomi and S. Levy, are there any thoughts that you think might be helpful to the audience to put into context for global trade and law that arise from looking at this slide? Now, I'll defer to whomever wants to jump in first.
Yeah, sure. I can provide some initial comments here. Ordinarily, when businesses kind of slow down, many companies take more aggressive monetization strategies of their innovation. And on the other hand, well-funded businesses, well, they'll go deep on the R&D, and for growth companies, the best work takes place in the cover of silence, right? And then as business ramps up, they take off, right? Um, um, these growth companies, but for well-funded companies, as business ramps up, then they have more money to put into R&D efforts. And so I think one thing that this graph shows is that whether it's big business or emerging businesses, the uh, the uh, the investment in innovation is continuing to take place, and 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 uh, and there's a significant rise. This is not linear. This is almost parabolic, and um, I'd love to hear. I'd love to pass it on to S. Lovey to share her comments. But yeah, there are definitely certain sectors and industries that are really capitalizing on these investments in innovation, and again, it's going to really be a parabolic effect in the coming years.
Jomi, thank you for that. And to segue to S. Levy, I will share one additional data point or data analysis that I did to complement this. I took a look at where the greatest returns on investment were being realized from a geographic perspective. Information was a little bit dated. It was from 2023, but it showed that from a sector perspective, the US is a significant laggard. It was the lowest regional return. Superior returns were from emerging markets in Asia, in Africa, and in other parts of the world. The US was joined by the European Union, unfortunately, in being kind of a return on investment laggard in this area. And the reason that matters is because from my work with the Global Chamber, one of the observations is if you want to thrive in this tariff turmoil environment, you would diversify your holdings and interests beyond the United States and have connections and community outside. So with that context, let's jump from Jomi's share over to S. Lovey and her observations on this particular graph.
No, I think this graph is amazing. I love the correlation between the innovation and economic development and return on investment. And I think it's really interesting how we define innovation, right? We could think about innovation in a technology perspective, but as Chris alluded to, it's also about who you're connected to and how. Right. I think it's really interesting when we start to think about those connections and how those human connections curate a system. And then we're able to innovate on models or outdated systems or maybe even programs on how things have been done previously. And so I think that I would love to think that, you know, as we innovate in community and we continue to be a globalized, global operating business and humanity, that the innovation will increase as well as the return on investment because we're thinking differently. We're getting different inputs and so different outputs are being received. Now, I don't think that that is solo or single to technological innovation. I think they go hand in hand. But if we only have technological innovation and we're receiving that ROI, we have to make sure that the human experience is tied to that trajectory and not left behind.
That's lovely. That was well shared. In fact, if I may, as I bridge to the next slide, I want to give a shout out to one of our participants, Nii Sanusi, who is an attorney in Africa, and he's working on developing a Pan-African network of practitioners to represent clients. One of the things that builds on what both S. Lovey and Jome shared is what may be innovation in one sector may be less so in another. So, for example, in looking at what Africa did in telecommunications, rather than replicate the US model of planting fiber optics and coaxial cable throughout the country and trying to use a capital-intensive method of connectivity, Africa in general took the wireless model because the continent is so large and it would be a tremendous capital uplift, and instead overlaid that. And so they leapfrogged the older innovation technology in favor of another one that they found that best suited their needs. Our research shows those kind of opportunities exist in a number of areas, whether it's a farmer with a unique planting method in one arid community that needs a market opportunity to connect it to someone else they just haven't connected, or whether it's just knowledge transfer. So I want to give a shout out to Nii for what he's doing in Africa, and also just encourage the audience to think in terms of innovation, as S. Lovey said, not just what's new to you, but what you may have that could be new and helpful to someone else. So with that, let's hand it over to Jome to enlighten us a little bit more about where the money's going in all this innovation and economic development.
Yeah, so thank you, Chris. So, my perspective as a lawyer, I develop IP strategies worldwide, protecting innovation. I file in over 18 countries. And, I engage with investors, VCs, private equity. And, I observe some patterns and some strategies that they engage with specific, especially with emerging markets. And with that context, just want to share a couple of things that I see from an innovation perspective and how that affects economic development and ultimately ROI. So, a lot of money right now, a lot of investment right now is going into sectors such as semiconductors, quantum computing, synthetic biology, and AI-driven products, particularly drug discovery. A lot of VCs and even sovereign wealth um, funds are attracted to these sectors. And that also ties into the rare earth mineral investments, particularly you'll find a lot of these rare earth minerals in uh, in Africa, um, as well as in Greenland. Yeah, so synthetic biology is kind of like artificial solutions, using some biological ingredients, to to enhance human health, right? For example. Um, and so, AI has been instrumental in, identifying these synergies and coming up with creative solutions. And then artificial intelligence, particularly generative AI. We see increased efficiencies in legal, finance, manufacturing, and education. And these two illustrations kind of show really uh, the the significant um, investments that are taking place in AI, and actually they've been going on for quite a while. Um, we have with ChatGPT and all these LLMs being kind of recently in the forefront. There's been a lot of investment in the background for 8 to 10 years. So the graph on the left talks about all-time highs for $100 million plus early stage rounds in AI in a single quarter. And so these are massive investments into early stage companies in AI. And as you can see, um, the number of massive investments uh, is on an upward trajectory. And then on the right here, you see the share of AI and ML deals within around the world, right? And um, the total number of deals is the combination. The total of AI and ML deals are in orange, and uh, and the deals that are not AI and ML are blue, right? So as you can see, um, uh, AI and ML, are taking slowly taking on a more significant role in the deal flow, and then and the resulting investment opportunity. Another thing that we see is especially in the U.S. and Europe and many parts of Asia is the government funding and private-public partnerships. Um, those are de-risking investor exposure and attributing to ROI. And we see this particularly in EV, you know, and as you know, there are ebbs and flows. There are where you look in US and you look in Europe, um, there'll be different incentives that come and go based on different administrations, different leadership, right? And so um, um, that can help in increasing risk and de-risking investor exposure. But there is some long-term when we look at EV, there is some long-term benefit and excitement. But obviously in the current times, especially in the West here in the Europe and US, it may take a little bit. So if we move on to the next slide here, we talk a little bit about climate aligned portfolios and climate/energy investments. Um, and you can see that oil and gas is on a downward trajectory, in the last 10 years or so. Coal is, yeah, slightly downward. And then all the other forms of energy um, are increasing. So those are grids and storage, renewable power, um, nuclear, um, energy infrastructure, and so on. And so, whether it's battery innovation, grid storage, green hydrogen, carbon capture, right? There is certainly long-term growth opportunities, even though there may be some ebbs and flows or some fluctuation in the current markets. And and then many of these technologies are aligned with AI and the energy demands of AI and semiconductor chip production. And so as AI demands increase and semiconductors chip production increases, well, the demand for cleaner energy will continue to increase, and that's not going anywhere. If we look 5, 10 years down the line, um, there may be some current destabilization, but 5, 10 years down the line, that's only going to increase, and I would argue that it's going to increase parabolically. Um, and then the last thing I would mention is in the emerging markets, in the underserved markets, particularly in Africa and in Asia. We see increasing trends as well as in South America. We see increasing trends in ed tech, health tech, and inclusive fintech, including cryptocurrency, right? And so, and AI is certainly playing a role there and improving lives, but also using some, sophisticated and unique technology to bring about a more globalized and a more networked world. So let me pass it on to Chris.
Hey, Joey, thank you for that share. And I got to ask you two questions in follow-up, and I'll also want to ping our audience to jump in, share perspectives in the chat, or come off mute a little bit later. The first one is basic. So if you had $1, actually, you're giving it to me, but you want to invest it and have it make a lot of money, where would you put it now?
Honestly, um, long-term gain, climate is definitely there. Short-term gain, like I mentioned earlier, defense and space. Space including like the dome. And you see the ongoing battle between Russia and Ukraine, and then the never-ending battle between Israel and Palestine. And I think countries around the world are looking at this and concerned about their people, about their sovereignty, and want to protect, right? And so certainly there is a short-term impact on that, and I think it'll extend into long-term, and then with AI and with uh, and the resulting chip production and EVs, right? That's gonna demand cleaner energy and a grid that can support all these things, right? And so I think in the next 5 to 10 years, there are some significant changes in these areas, and they're worthy of investment.
Thank you for that. And my second question is uh, regarding to your opinion, S. Lovey, and the entire audience on if you had a chance to look at the recent AI roadmap presented by the U.S. executive, of which two of those features actually are, one is to have copyrights and other material be consumed by AI at no cost. And then the second is to really relax some of the building of artificial intelligence infrastructure, which could impact energy consumption as well as other regulatory areas. Have you had a chance to even give any thoughts to those areas from your perspective, Jomi or S. Lovey? Is there an opportunity for unique hotels that also have dual use for power generation and other types of innovations?
Yes, I'm happy to share. So a big part of the work that we do at BHNIA is community driven, yes, but it's also building out the entire ecosystem. So as you think of all of the different things that you see, touch, and feel inside of a hotel, from the lights to immersing yourself in the pool, or even the luxury vehicle that may be available as an amenity. I think technology touches on every single piece of a hotel's ecosystem. When we think about the edifice itself, as far as sustainability, yes. When we think about the food and agriculture that we consume or that gets delivered to the hotel, for sure, how that's powered, how greenhouses are taken care of, and the soil. So there's technology along every single touch point of hospitality. And I may be a little bit biased. I do definitely want to invest in, continue pouring investment inside of the land that the hotels sit on, the real estate itself and the development. But to your point, Chris, there's definitely an opportunity to invest in specific ventures that sit along the ecosystem of a hospitality supply chain, as well as the technology itself.
Awesome. Thank you for that, because that fits, I think, into your space of innovation. And I know we have a constituency on from Arizona, which has the wild, in my opinion, combination of incredible growth, especially in the semiconductor sector, but also significant challenges as far as global warming in the infrastructure side. So could be a potential idea to consider for Arizona and comparable areas around the world. So building on that, we're now down on the home stretch. We have our last 8 minutes. So I want to
Well,
do,
Chris, if you don't mind, I'd like to comment briefly on the last comment here regarding AI and the copyrights being consumed. From
please
a
do.
broad level, the regulatory space is is still catching up, right? And so there's a lot of freedom for uh, for AI development, um, which is a double-edged sword, right? For on one side, it will accelerate innovation, but on the other side, with AI, we don't know, um, uh, if what some of the experts are saying is true, AI taking over and controlling humans, or what have like a Terminator 2 kind of world, that could be very problematic also. And so, developing guardrails and ultimately controls, on the ethical development and use of AI is going to be critical, right? And right now we're in the midst of an AI arms race, really. Various countries across the world are racing to get the biggest and biggest and strongest AI models and tools, right? And so, but there comes a cost if the regulatory space does not catch up soon enough and provide ethical norms and guidelines um, to regulate countries, but also regulate the world. There may need to be some sort of treaty or some sort of European a world board of sorts to to member countries, and just like they are in other spaces. And so it'll be interesting to see how these dynamics develop.
Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me well?
Yes, I can. Go for it.
Nice. Hi, nice to meet you. I was a student at the American University, Washington College of Law, and now I'm a student doing research for Nanterre University. I'm working a lot on privacy issues, tech issues. I'm writing about data protection in the EU and the US with a comparative law perspective. I just wanted to jump in to explain my thoughts on the difficulties to find like a sweet spot in policy in the EU and in the US when it comes to regulating AI. I think it has been very interesting in the last weeks because I keep seeing updates everywhere on the EU AI Act, and those updates are so hard to understand most of the time. And as someone who specializes in EU law and in tech law, it is kind of heartbreaking because I see new graphs every day coming up and it gets more complicated as it goes. And it almost looks like overregulation at this point, which might be an issue for innovation and might drive businesses out of the EU, which is a critical issue for us now. But on the other line, we can see how the US is getting rid of certain safeguards, which are also important to make sure that those models still look like the best form they can give without also impairing human abilities. And I think one of the best innovations I have seen in creating a sweet spot in those policies, if we can call it like that, is northern countries in Europe tackling AI issues by educating. So there is a fight on disinformation by more directly in schools explaining what AI does and how it works, so you can make sure to implement not local but personal safeguards on how we should be using it, more than having an approach which is either overregulating it or underregulating it, just so everyone is equipped as an individual in seeing the things for what they are. And yeah, I just wanted to share this European perspective. But thank you for this meeting. It's very interesting to hear from professionals that do different things I'm not specialized in trade, so it's always good to get to know more about those things. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jana, for that share. And that's one of the reasons it's the Global Chamber, because we're bringing in perspectives from a diverse area of geographies around the world. I want to note that we have a question in from Rifat Kandakar. So we're going to address that. But if I may, Rifat, and hopefully I'm saying your name correctly, we're going to push that to the end because there are some close-up items we need to get to and try to stay on schedule. So hopefully, thank you for your grace. The first is that in addressing the AI roadmap from the United States, I'm going to paraphrase Senator Josh Hawley from Missouri. And basically, he said that at present, the big tech sector is perpetuating the biggest intellectual property theft ever in the history. So the prospect of having big tech under the context of AI consume intellectual property owned by others is legally offensive, at least. So we will see how that works as we go forward. The second is our hot mic moment. So I want to try to amplify Rick Gonder's question and put it out to the team because it seems to be it's a passion point. And it relates to any inputs or thoughts on carbon credits. So that sounds like a Jomi question. And Eslav, anything you want to add on that briefly? And Jomi, it's in the chat, by the way.
Yeah, sure. I can comment on it briefly. Actually, I'm working on some of this carbon credit trades, and so um, uh, it is a new it is a disruptive space. Actually, the project I'm working on is carbon credits trade through the use of the blockchain, right? To record and uh, and then to retire carbon credits, right? And then to transact, right? And so uh, and not only that, also to verify the credits. And when are you using, there are difficulties in um and time issues in verifying these credits. And so there is some disruptive behavior, disruptive innovation going on how to reduce the lead time, to verify carbon credits, and then an efficient way to trade it, and then an efficient way to store it and to retire credits. And so the legal aspects, yeah, there are some guidance there. It is emerging space, but um, with blockchain, the regulatory space is still up and coming. But with respect to the other aspects of credit, carbon credit, trading, retiring, um, valuing a credit, um, those regulatory spaces are still there, right? And so marrying the two is tricky, and that's what's really emerging. Um, and so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out and how the two sectors kind of merge together to make carbon credit trading more efficient and more accessible to an average consumer.
Jomi, thank you for that. And I want to encourage Rifat to connect with you if you're open to it offline. And Jomi's LinkedIn information is at the end of this presentation deck. So Rifat, please get a copy of the presentation. Quick shout out as we try to stay as close to schedule, if not on as possible. Next month, we'll have Irene Chen, who happens to be a Global Chamber member and a noted global trade attorney, on as one of our featured guests. And we have another that's in process. So think about that bridge from what you've heard today into what we're going to make available to you next month. As I mentioned, our contact information for Jomi and for Eslavi is available in this deck. They're both on LinkedIn. And I will also share that I'm available on LinkedIn, and I want to bridge on something that Jomi mentioned, both artificial intelligence and blockchain. That little avatar you see in the lower right-hand corner is Tilly. That's our legal tech social impact startups IP avatar. Tilly only talks about intellectual property. We're happy to let you chat with her, and because we're on a mission to help underserved communities create intellectual property and to monetize it. So look forward to our next show, and I look forward to connecting with you offline and sharing with you how my journey to become a member of the Supreme Court Bar, which is evidenced by that picture in the right-hand corner with me at the court with Thurgood Marshall's image, is being used to help us support our mission for social impact on intellectual property rights, and also to support what we're trying to do to make the Global Chamber of members aware of what's up in global law. So that said, we're adjourned. I regret I'm being 2 minutes over schedule, but I hope you have an outstanding weekend and look forward to connecting in the future. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.